Hello, I'm Vyki the Nerdy Crone. Because we're getting to the spooky season of Halloween or Samhain, I thought a nice little spooky story from this book here called Bogie Tales of East Anglia. This was written by a lady raised in Suffolk, and she collected folk tales. And her cousin, known as M.R. James, he wrote ghost stories in the local areas, and he's quite a well-known author. Now, I'm not reading from beginning to end. I've just chosen a few stories that are very similar to each other, and they are what we call black dog stories, because in East Anglia, of which I'm born and bred in Suffolk, M.R. James and M.H. James both come from the 19th century. And that was very much a time when these sort of stories would be passed down family to family, sitting by the fire and scaring the life out of people. So definitely the sort of tales that you would have heard this time of year. So she decided to collect these stories, and she was raised in the Bogie area, and she used to talk to the local people about folklore, and sometimes she would even copy it verbatim for her book. And the stories are absolutely fascinating. I've just collected a few together that are very similar, because East Anglia is famous for the black shook or devil dog. And the devil dog is said to be this huge black demon dog that if you meet on a dark night, he's not a nice dog, and other people say he has helped them out. To me, he sounds like a guardian spirit that is taking care of the land. So maybe if you're messing around, he ain't going to be too pleased. But this devil dog is said to have caused scratches in the door of the church of Blythburgh, which is a village on the Suffolk coast. And also on the same day, now this was during a tempest as well, he is supposed to have gone to Beccles, which is a few miles up the road. He is said to have killed a person. However, the black shuck is not the only black dog story in East Anglia. Our first story is The Hateful Thing. There is an uncomfortable sort of ghostly terror in beast form that haunts the villages on the borders of two counties, which is commonly called the Hateful Thing. I allude to the churchyard or hell beast. This charming creature generally takes somewhat indefinite form of a swoundling, i.e. swooning shadow, whatever that may be. Whenever it is met in any locality, it is the sign that some great and unusually horrible wickedness is about to be committed, or it has just taken place there. The writer, when crossing a field at night, once came upon a countryman who had just seen this apparition, but a slight search for the goblin was wholly unsuccessful. One carefully authenticated story from a host of others on the same subject may prove interesting. It is given in the words of the narrator, a respectable old charwoman who appears wholly unimaginative and who is the mother of a large family. Mrs. S tells her story as follows. My youngest daughter, A, was keeping company with a young man. They hadn't got as far as arming it, let alone wasting it yet. So, A, she says to me, Mother, she say, a walk in the evening do you good. Do come along of us. I went along together, as they seemed to want me, unusual daughter, and her young man took me to Gillingham. And then about 8 or 9, we went back to Geldeston, over the market path, and it was that time when I saw the hateful thing. Just as we got over the stile into the road, A say, Mother, she says, that dog did frighten me. I says, where? Neither me nor the young man seen any dog. It's on her head, says A, and oh, it ain't a dog, it's bigger than a horse now, and it's walking slow. Now I began to get scary, and mind that I'd never been born under the chime hours, so she could see things. Well, I clung to her young man, and I listened, and I heard a thumping, but I could see nothing. Well, I said, "Oh, we are just agin it," and the young man struck with his stick about the road, and then she come over and clung hold of me. And the moment she touched me, I saw the hateful thing. The beast was black and didn't keep the same size, and it wasn't any regular shape. We walked slow, for I was afraid of it getting behind us, and we just kept agin it. I lost sight of it every time left hold of me, and the young man wasn't a bit afraid. He saw nothing, but he heard thumping. Well, we went on 1/2 mile, and it was terrible passing Gelders, for I had seen things there before. Now, Gelders is a clump of trees by the roadside where tradition says there lay a stone on which the Danegeld was paid. Now, the Danegeld is what the Saxons used to pay the Vikings to leave them alone. It's kind of like Viking protection money. We won't raid your village if you pay up. See? The beast kept before us until it came to Sandy Lane that go up to the churchyard. And it went off there. And we went up to the village. And A's young man had to go right back up the road from where he came from, Beccles. The seeing by contact is the curious feature of this tale, which the woman and her daughter fully believe. As we can see there, this mum will chaperone her daughter and this young man that she was seeing. It sounds like the daughter wanted them to go. Maybe she felt a little bit uncomfortable with the bloke. She wasn't sure about him and wanted her mum around. Best to have a chaperone, especially in those days. And she also talks about the chime hours, which were 8, 12 and 4 at night. So in other words, midnight, dusk of dawn. So it was a nice short little story. So let's have a look at the next one. A were-dog story. This tale runs as follows. It is still common talk among the beachmen at Lowestoft. An Italian gentleman with curly hair and very dark complexion asked a fisher boy of Lowestoft to become his page, but the boy refused, as he did not wish to go to foreign parts, whereupon the Italian, far from being angry, asked the boy to look after a dog for him as he was going away. Now, the dog had been seen in the town and its ownership was well known, though, strange to say, the dog and its master had never been seen together. It was a fine dog, a large, curly black retriever, very long and very lean. When the fisher boy found the gentleman had really gone away, he began to look after the dog, for which he had been very handsomely paid beforehand. Every morning the boy, who was 14 years old, went out for a swim in the sea, and the dog went with him. One day, when the boy had swam further than usual, he found that the dog savagely resented his returning to shore. With such growlings and menacings, the terrified boy was obliged to swim on and on, further out to sea, whilst the dog swam close behind him. At last, the boy, turning his head around in desperation, saw to his intense and most benumbing terror the dark, saturnine face of the Italian gentleman close beside him. The metamorphosis was only momentary, and on looking around again he saw the dog had reappeared, and by continued and fierce growling and biting urged him out to sea. Fortunately, a smack under the press of sail scudded by, and the boy was able to attract the notice of those on board, who came to his rescue, but his neck and shoulder were bleeding from the dog's angry attack. The animal was seen to dive like a porpoise, and, reappearing a great distance off, swam away. The boy's name was M, and he used to work in slack times at the tan yard in the lower part of the old town of Lowestoft, 'tis said. After the remarkable escape recorded above, it was remembered on all sides how many boys of about 14 years were yearly drowned off the town, and how, in particular, only a year or so back, a boy's body had been found washed up off Ness Point with the marks of dogs' teeth on his neck and shoulder, which till now had placed to the credit of an attempt to save life on the part of some noble animal. Interesting. Now, what I can tell you, being a resident of Lowestoft, is at one point we had the town on top of the cliff. We still have the town on top of the cliff. But below, at the bottom of the cliff, we had what was then called the beach village. There's very little of it left because in the 60s they decided it was a slum and pulled most of it down. So now you've got the Bird's Eye factory, which if you like fish fingers, you'll know exactly what Bird's Eye is. You've got an industrial estate. But before that was all there was once homes, schools, pubs, lots of pubs, and churches, and it just got bulldozed, and the beach village was no more. It was also called the Grit. So there are people still alive today who still remember living in the Grit, and they remember it very fondly. So the last one is called the Hellhound. At the beginning of the story, it talks about the north end of a town called A. Now, there is only one town on the east coast with beginning with A, and that is Aldborough. So it's likely that this story is about Aldborough. At the north end of the town of Aldborough lie the salt marshes, which are sometimes full, like a lake, after rains or the prevalence of certain winds, and of which there was a sunset view exhibited in London not long ago. So that sounds like it was a painting of some description of the sunset at Aldborough. So that sounds rather nice, doesn't it? Be interesting to find out if that painting still exists and where it is. Here, a favourite walk of the inhabitants leads across a sort of common planted with a fir grove by one or other of two paths. One which goes through the pine wood and emerges near the station. The other leaves the pine wood on the left and skirts the mere, crossing the line and leading into a sandy lane between more pine trees. So basically what it's saying here is that there are two paths. One goes across the railway line and the other one doesn't. At the sea end of this waste is a kissing gate, as wickets are often called in those parts. Yes, I know what a kissing gate is. It's basically a gate with two little wood bits either side, and when you open it and close it, it sort of touches each side like a kissing. It's to stop animals from going where you don't want them to, but humans can come in and out as they wish. And here it is likely that the presiding Bogie will meet you. If you walk there after dark, the Bogie is a large black dog with fiery eyes and a fierce appearance. Do not, however, be afraid of him if you keep to the path that leads across the line, for all will be well, and he will walk to heel as a good dog should, and will only make you feel rather nervous by his odd silent trot. But if you want to go the other way, he will show you what he thinks by an awful growling. He will stand in your path and shew his teeth, and he will snarl till you are almost paralysed with fear, and then he will sit down and stare at you with his eyes aflame. Give up your plan, or it will go the worse for you, though the dog never bites or barks, but sometimes drags you by your clothes. Untold horrors befall a man and woman who persists in thwarting him. You give up the walk under the pine trees, he ceases to growl. You step again towards the other path, his eyes no longer aflame. You can walk boldly on, he follows to heel as before. You reach the gates at the level crossing, he sits down and watches you out of sight, and you totter on a few steps, gladly down in a hedge to rest your shaking limbs. Another walk he has, Some 5 miles off, under the avenue of elms, that arch, the entrance to a little village, and here he was met one night by the father of a servant of ours, who offended him by stopping, and was treated by him with great indignity. If one might suggest an origin for a beast so mysterious, it seems not impossible that in smuggling days, for which the coast is notorious, there really was a clever dog trained to keep people from hunting among the trees and underbush, and that the terror of him has survived, blending probably with some older legend of a church beast. It is strange to make a terror of a fine black dog when many of the fishermen keep dogs and are much attached to them, the said dog in some cases dying before tax day and reappearing as well as ever after. So there we go. I'm not quite sure about the tax day thing, quite what that's about, but perhaps it was to make the taxman sympathetic or something, I don't know. But there you go. I might do some more of these because these are really quite fun. There's some really great little stories in here from what I've read. I haven't read all of them, but it would be nice to do a few more. So perhaps if I get the time, as well as I've still got to do episode 3 of Rings of Power. So that's going to be next on my list. And I need to do another more tarot readings as well. But I hope you've enjoyed this. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, look after yourselves, and mind how you go.